Jacques Derrida is a French philosopher and the leading figure in the transformation of literary and cultural studies that swept through the English-speaking world in the past 20 years. In particular, he launched the massively influential concept of deconstruction. Deconstruction is an approach to reading and listening, which rather than trying to uncover an author's essential argument or underlying intention, attends instead to the shifting and contradictory patterns that play on the surface of a text. Derridian deconstruction has many enemies, though, and it's been accused of undermining Western values and the very idea of the human subject, leaving only relativism or nihilism in their place. Derrida's conversation with Alan Montefiore in the Sheldonian Theatre is part of a series organised by Oxford Amnesty Lectures.
Well, Jacques, this is a slightly formal and picturesque setting for a discussion, but let's try and ignore the picturesqueness of it. We were told that the discussion, at least I was told, that the discussion was to be directed towards, and I semi-quote, I paraphrase, the ethical and political problems posed by the dissolution and deconstruction of the subject, in the terms that the liberal tradition has taken the human being to be the subject of his or her own experience, life, activity, responsibilities, and so on. Still paraphrasing, does this subject, the subject whose freedom Amnesty International, for example, seeks everywhere to defend in the name of human rights, or the so-called rights of man, does this subject still exist? If not, what sense can be made of this freedom that we are so concerned to protect? Well, that was the theme we were given for the discussion. And there are, of course, a lot of problematic terms here, not least the very term subject. But I thought it would be helpful if we could start, by asking you if you could just explain in simple terms, however misleading simple terms may be at a certain level, just what you take to be the deconstruction of the subject, or what you take it to amount to, and why, as I know, you see this not, in fact, as a threat, but rather, indeed, as a move towards strengthening our appreciation of the importance of protecting human freedom.
Thank you. It's a very, thank you first for being here. It's a very intimidating audience. And first, I thought when I was honored by the invitation that the format of a discussion would be more appropriate than a formal lecture. And I think I made a mistake, because if I had prepared something, I would be protected by a written text. So I wanted to come here unprotected, just totally vulnerable to questions from the floor. And I've just been told that there would be no questions from the floor. So that's the first threat to human rights. Now, I'll try, nevertheless, to answer Alan's simple questions. Of course, I don't know to what extent the word deconstruction of the subject is familiar to all of you. Deconstruction is an ugly and difficult word, and I'll try to, answering Alan's request, try to speak in a jargon-free language, as they say in the United States. Jargon-free, or to say cholesterol-free, or sugar-free. So jargon-free language. First of all, I would say that, using one of your words, that deconstruction of the subject, if there is such a thing, which I doubt, can in no case amount to a dissolution of the subject. Deconstruction doesn't mean, to me, dissolution, which means that when you deconstruct, and I'll try to explain what I mean by that, when you deconstruct anything, you simply do not destroy or dissolve or cancel the legitimacy of what you're deconstructing. In that case, deconstructing the subject, if there is such a thing, would mean first to analyze historically in a genealogical way, the formation and the different layers which have built, so to speak, a concept. Every concept as its own history, and the concept of subject as a very, very long, heavy, and complex history. First, for instance, in the English tradition, philosophical tradition, the word subject is not used the same way, or sometimes it's not used as a canonical concept, the way it is used in continental philosophy, in German philosophy, in French philosophy. So first we have to translate these words into first a different idiom, and finally in all the possible idioms. Since we're supposed to address here the problem of human rights, we face first the problem of language. If there are human rights, which means universally valid human rights, they should be accessible, understandable to everyone, whatever language they understand or they speak. Now, if you try to make the word subject understandable in a culture in which the philosophical Greek, German, Latin tradition is not familiar, then the word doesn't mean anything. So the first thing you have to do is a universal translation of what the subject is. So deconstruction of the subject is first, among other things, the genealogical analysis of the trajectory through which the concept has been built, used, legitimized, and so on and so forth. To say just a few words about this tradition, what we call a subject was first in, let's say, the Aristotelian tradition, the hypokaimenon, the substance, something which is underneath, identical to itself, and different from the different properties, qualities, attributes. It is the center of an identity. Everything which occurs to a subject is an event which occurs to it, but which doesn't constitute it. So the subject is something identical to itself, cannot be divided, and can be counted as one. Now, when you deconstruct the subject, you analyze all the assumptions, the hidden assumptions, which are implied in the philosophical or the ethical or the juridical or the political use of the concept of subjects. Now, as you know, the human rights, what we call the human rights, is a set of concepts, laws, requirements, which were not given in nature from the beginning. It has been a long conquest, a long battle to formulate what the human rights are or should be, and it's in the process of this constitution of the human rights that the concept of subject has been referred to. From the Aristotelian tradition, then to Cartesian tradition, the ego cogito, and then the Kantian I think, when Kant says, the I think, ich denke, must accompany all my representations, and whatever experience I have or I make, it is referred to a subject, to an I, which says, I, And the I is supposed to be the subject, identical to itself, and always intact under all circumstances, in every culture, in every different empirical context.